Good evening and welcome to this virtual public meeting for the I-55 corridor improvements. My name is Cordell Whitlock with Vector Communications and I'm your meeting facilitator. Vector is providing public engagement and communication services for this study, working with the prime contractor WSP on behalf of the Missouri Department of Transportation. We truly appreciate you being here. Tonight, we will be reviewing the I-55 corridor improvement preliminary designs. These preliminary designs are based on public input and engineering studies completed since September of 2021. We will also share more about MoDOT's project goals and timeline. At the end of tonight's meeting, we want to hear from you. So before we get started, let's talk about our agenda for tonight. First, we will introduce the project team and provide an overview of the I-55 corridor improvements project. We will then talk about the design build stage of this project and project goals before reviewing the preliminary designs. We will then have a Q&A comment session before concluding with next steps. This is the third public meeting since this project began. The same information that you will hear tonight was also shared last night at the Festus Public Library. You will hear more from the project team about what we have been planning since our last public meeting back in January of 2022. Everyone except the panelists are on mute, so everyone can hear clearly. If you have a question and/or a comment, please click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can submit your questions anytime during this meeting. When it comes time to answer questions, I will read them out loud. You also have the opportunity to comment by completing our online public comment meeting form at surveymonkey.com/r/I-55-comments. I know that was quite a mouthful, but don't worry, this link will be posted in the chat box. Also, a recording of tonight's meeting will be posted on the project website. Please share this information with your neighbors and friends. To recap this project's footprint, we will be sharing improvements to I-55 from the Peevely interchange to the north to the US 67 interchange to the south. We are also looking at a section of US 67 between US 61 and Highway CC. We will continue with introductions. Two of my colleagues at Vector Communications, Gabriella Bloom and Taylor Bardsley, are part of this meeting, but they're behind the scenes directing our production. Thanks to both of them. Will Crussell with WSP will now introduce the consulting team. Will, please introduce yourself, your team members, and their project roles.
Thank you, Cordell. My name is Will Crussell. I am serving as the project manager for the WSP team studying this corridor for MoDOT. With me is Mike Doldy. He is analyzing and modeling all the traffic and operations along the corridor and assisting with safety analysis. And also on the project is Jennifer Pangborn, not with us tonight, but on the project. I think at this point, I'll turn it over to Justin Wolf to introduce the MoDOT team.
Hello, I'm Justin Wolf, project director for the I-55 design build project. Tonight with me on the MoDOT side is Jen Becker, who has been spearheading the study efforts for this I-55 project. Tom Blair, the district engineer for the St. Louis region, and Stephen O'Connor, the area engineer for the Franklin Jefferson area. And also we have Charlene Gostin, our communications specialist for the Franklin Jefferson area. So tonight, what I want to talk about is why we're here tonight. And this is because earlier this year, we had an infusion of state and federal funds. And we've been able to increase the budget for this I-55 project from what was talked about a year ago is about $94 million. We've now increased to about $206 million for construction. And at this point, we're transitioning from the study phase of this project, which Jen has been spearheading, and now we're going into the implementation phase, where we'll be talking about how we're going to deliver the I-55 design build project. So to give you a little brief discussion or description of design build, keep in mind that 99% of the projects that MoDOT does are traditional design bid build projects, where MoDOT designs the plans to 100%, we tabulate quantities, and we send those plans and those quantities out to bidders, and the low bid is who is selected to build the project. It's a bit different with design build. With design build, we shortlist a design build team based on their qualifications. So contractors will team up with consultants in pursuit of this proposal. So once we've shortlisted these teams based on their qualifications, we will release all of the information we've gathered to date. So all of the survey data, all of the information that we've obtained during the study, and even our alternatives that we've developed. We'll release that to the proposing teams, and along with that, we'll write our request for proposal. And then the teams will basically create their proposal, and their proposal is going to be really driven by the project goals, which I'm about ready to go on over. So keep in mind that MoDOT has done other design build projects in the St. Louis area, and we've had great success. So a lot of people will remember the I-64 project, the Page Phase 3 project, the 141-44 design build project, and more recently, the 270 North design build project, which I'm transitioning off onto this project. So tonight, I really want to focus on our project goals, and because these goals are what drive the contractor, the proposing teams to fulfill and basically address the needs that we have along this corridor. So these goals are in order of importance. So our first goal is to deliver the project within the program budget. And again, our program budget is $236 million. And that may change. We're trying to absorb a couple other projects into this, so that may change in the future, but we're still talking somewhere between 236 and $246 million. The second goal is to maximize reliability and safety on Interstate 55 and US 67. The third goal is to provide a durable and maintainable transportation system compatible with regional development. Our fourth goal is to construct the project safely and minimize impacts to customers. And our fifth goal is to complete the project on schedule, utilizing a diverse workforce. And I'm sure that that goal makes you wonder, when is the schedule? So below here, I have some milestones. And right now we have the completion of the entire project scheduled for December of 2026. Some of these more short-term goals that are in front of you are more directed for as we go into the design build phase. This December, we are going to release our requests for qualifications. The design build teams will submit their statements of qualifications, and MoDOT will shortlist those teams based on their qualifications. In January, we will release our request for proposal, and those teams will begin developing their proposal, which MoDOT will score, and we'll score it based on how it meets these project goals. We anticipate awarding the project this summer and having a public meeting this coming summer in 2023, where we'll have all of the details for the new proposal. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to Will Kressel.
Thank you, Justin. First, as we present the project, where we're at, where we've been, where we're headed, I wanted to kind of recap. So if you've attended previous public meetings, some of these slides will look somewhat familiar. Just as a reminder, a year ago, we started assessing what the existing issues, challenges, constraints were along the project, and requested input. We got feedback from you back then, from community stakeholders as well, and we formulated a good list of deficiencies, things to address along the corridor. And if you think back to the goals that Justin just described, these deficiencies are what we're asking the contractors to address with the project, and the goals would prioritize how they might go about addressing those to get MoDOT and you the best project that is viable. The project begins, I guess the north end of the project starts where the 3-lane section ends at the Peevely exit. If you can visualize that exit, if you're heading southbound on 55 and you're in the outside lane, whether you want to get off at Peevely or not, some drivers tend to be surprised as they're coming around the corner, up over the top of the hill, and then all of a sudden they're in an exit lane and heading down the ramp. So there is a little bit of confusion right there. Additional constraints right there, just north of that interchange and then just south, there are 2 separate railroad crossings. One is Burlington Northern on the north side, Union Pacific on the south side. Those crossings are near where the ramps connect to the 55, which does present some constraints. The Route Z interchange at Peevely, if you picture being on the highway underneath Interstate 55, there's bridge columns between the through lanes in underneath 55. And that bridge has some low vertical clearance, with the truck stops, the quarry, the industry. Increasing the vertical clearance for that bridge is required. And then I think the last piece right there is that interchange is really at the bottom of the hill. So if you're entering the highway, whether you're heading south or north, the ramp you take climbs up a hill, and then once you get to the highway, you're going to continue to climb in this area, which is challenging due to the length of the ramps, and then also additional challenges due to the high volume of trucks, which take longer to accelerate as well. Moving south, the project does cross over Herky-Horn Road near the racetrack, Joachim Creek, and then the next interchange is at Herculaneum, McNutt Street. That one's similar to Route Z, has bridge columns in the travel lanes of McNutt underneath. The ramps at that interchange are short as well. And on the north side are a bit steeper than on the south side. Let's see, moving further south, there is another railroad crossing. Burlington Northern crosses right where the cursor is right now. That's an existing bridge that was reconstructed about 10 years ago. That bridge is in good shape, and it was if you picture that bridge, it does fill the entire roadway corridor. It fills the entire median between the northbound and southbound, so that bridge can be reused. Looking at the next exit at Festus, Route A, if you're in the southbound direction, exiting at that interchange, there is not a lane next to the outside lane to slow down before you go up that ramp. So that's a substandard condition there. A short ramp plus no deceleration lane next to the highway right there. Similar thing happens on the exit ramp for northbound 55 to Route A. There is a short deceleration lane, but it's not the standard length for current design criteria. And then the interchange itself, there are issues with if you're on Route A and entering 55, making a right turn. There are, the way the geometry works right now, when the left turn has a green light, the right turn should yield to those cars. But the way the geometry is, it's a little bit more challenging to notice. Some of the visual cues are not there. So It's a functional interchange, but it's got a couple of deficiencies right there. Let's see, moving south, there are a large volume of traffic entering from Festus and exiting at 67. So that short distance between the Festus and 67 interchanges, there's cars on the highway wanting to stay on the highway. There's cars on the highway wanting to get off at 67. And there's cars from Route A wanting to enter the highway, either to take 67 or head south on 55. And it's a high volume of cars and a somewhat short distance for that to happen. And then heading south on 55 to south on 67, that's a very high volume ramp in the afternoon, in the evenings. And then in the opposite direction in the mornings, heading north on 67, take that tight loop ramp to head north on 55. That's an equally high volume, about the same amount of cars. That has the challenging geometry, tight radius, slow traffic. And then once you get to the top of the ramp, quick acceleration to merge with the cars that are going 70 miles an hour heading north into town. I think the last two pieces I'll talk about, where the cursor is along 67, there is a traffic signal at Route CC at that intersection right there. That happens to be at the top of the hill. It's the top of a very steep hill, and there's a large volume of cars that go through that intersection. And what tends to happen is during a red light, the cars have to stop to let the opposite directions go. As that happens, traffic does, in part due to the steep grade, start to back up all the way towards 55, and then sometimes up the ramp towards 55 as well. So that just a constraint there. And then I think the last piece to mention is at the in the northbound direction between 67 and A, there is a short ramp that enters the highway. And then I mentioned before a short ramp to exit the highway at Route A. To make that movement, drivers need to accelerate, get up to speed pretty quick, and then if they're going to continue on 55, they keep going. If they're going to exit at A, they got to slow down pretty quick. So those were some of the geometric deficiencies we identified. Mike, I think I'll turn it over to you to go through the next few slides.
Sure. We're going to go into a little bit more detail on each of those sections and interchanges, and where we see some where those geometric issues and other issues cause some congestion and safety issues. So looking at the Peevely interchange at Route C, as Will mentioned, coming southbound, we go from 3 lanes down to 2. So as most people are probably aware, there's always a lot of congestion there in the afternoon through that interchange, and really, and then throughout the corridor. Those bridge columns underneath on Route Z do cause confusion and some friction underneath that don't allow all of the lanes to be used to their full capacity. And then to the west of the interchange, we have a few unsignalized driveways and entrances to some of the businesses along there. And they're also close to the signalized intersections at the interchange. And those unsignalized access points, for the most part, don't align. So you have traffic turning in and out at different points and conflicting with each other. Anything else on this one, Will?
Just a visual cue to point out, I think you can probably see the colors, the green, red, and yellow. If you look at the legend on the bottom, the green, minimal congestion, yellow, mild congestion, red, heavy congestion. And then the other thing to point out is the blue dots The dark blue are where fatal injuries have happened within the last 5 years. The next shade of blue is where some serious injury crashes have happened. And then the smallest, lightest blue is where minor injuries have happened. And that those are the crashes that we've got on there are really the crashes that resulted with injury up to a fatality, not including all the property damage, only crashes on here. So the amount of crashes in this area is rather substantial.
Thanks, Will. And the other thing to note, the colors you see for the traffic, that's typically the worst if it's either the AM or the PM when that occurs. And then the other thing to note for traffic is this interchange, and as we see on the next interchanges, there's quite a bit of heavy truck traffic, so large trucks that are entering and exiting the interstate, and those are leading to some of the congestion issues and safety issues that we see too. So next we're going to move to the Herculaneum interchange at McNutt. We have some of the same issues as we mentioned. Traffic is kind of restricted back at Route Z, but we're getting just as much as we can through this area. But once we improve that area at Z, that's going to start pushing that problem south. And then on McNutt itself, underneath the overpass, again, we have those bridge columns between lanes that don't allow traffic to fully utilize the capacity of those lanes. We do have a closely spaced interchange just to the west at the McNutt roundabout. And again, at this interchange, a lot of heavy truck traffic coming on and off the interstate, and also just to some of the uses around the area. And as you can see, some of these, the blue dots that Will mentioned, quite a bit of, unfortunately, fatal crashes over the last few years, and a lot of serious injury crashes. So next, moving down to the Route A Festus interchange. As Will mentioned earlier, if you're coming southbound, there's no deceleration lane, and that lane to exit, or the exit ramp, kind of pops around up as you come around the curve and over a little bit of a hill. So it kind of somewhat comes out of nowhere as you're driving south on the corridor. That also is a very heavy ramp when we look at traffic volumes. So a lot of traffic exiting there, causing a lot of congestion in that area. The other ramps are also, as we mentioned, a little bit short and not having the XL and decel lanes that we would want. And then with the southbound on ramp, with that aux lane, only one lane, you can possibly get stuck in that lane. If you're trying to continue on I-55, you do have to maneuver over one lane at least in order to continue on. And this is where you have the most traffic that is positioning, with a majority of traffic exiting to Route 67, just a little bit over, I think half exits to 67 to go south in the afternoon, and the rest remaining continuing on I-55. We mentioned earlier, in the morning, the big movement is northbound 67 to northbound I-55 using this tight loop ramp, which is over capacity at the moment. Same with the southbound ramp in the afternoon, also over capacity with current volumes and also the projected volumes that we're looking at in the future. And then with the signal that Will mentioned at Route CC at the crest of that hill, every afternoon we see that congestion that queues back all the way to the interstate. You again have a lot of heavy truck traffic that continues down 67. They get caught in that queue, and anytime you stop a truck on a hill, it's always going to be difficult to get that moving again, just really compounding the problem. Anything else in this area, Will?
Just one other thing, you've covered most of it. The up near the hospital at the 61 intersection, the small spacing between that intersection and then the ramps to and from I-55 at that interchange. It does, as you're exiting from northbound 55, taking that exit ramp to head into town, Crystal City or Festus, you merge with the northbound 67 traffic real close to that intersection. So it does present some challenges. Some people on 67 wanting to turn right to go to the hospital. Some people exiting the highway wanting to weave across that. That's another problem, challenge area that we identified.
That was a good point. And that hospital is a big generator of traffic, as is the retail developments on either side of the interstate. Then also more at 67 and A, lots of retail, generates lots of traffic during the peak hours and throughout the day and throughout the week.
Right. Okay, so with all of those challenges and some others in mind, what we did was put together a series of alternatives, solutions. If you remember back beginning of this year, we held a public meeting and presented a couple different options at each of the locations along the corridor. And generally speaking, at all locations, the community advisory group that we've been meeting with and the input from the public was similar or same as far as results. And the preliminary design that we've moved forward with reflects the results of those surveys. So what you see on the screen here, just a couple landmarks. The orange within the cyan color along the improvements, those are bridge locations. So north of Route Z, where the cursor is there, that's the bridge over Burlington Northern. The orange indicates we're identifying these as new bridges or replacement of the existing bridges. So you'll see that on this slide and the next two. The big, maybe the largest recommendation coming out of this study and analysis is the first bubble you see on the left side of the screen, add a third lane to the I-55 corridor. So extend that third lane that currently ends at the Peevely exit, extend that all the way down through this corridor to the US 67 interchange, where the traffic is greatly reduced in that area. In doing that, a number of the bridges over the railroads, Herkyhorn Road, Joachim Creek, by necessity, those needed to be replaced to accommodate a third lane on I-55, and in part due to condition and type of the bridges and vertical clearance along there. At Route Z, we were looking at reconstruction of Route Z under 55, generally where it is today, but without bridge columns between the lanes. And then reconstruction of the I-55 bridge over the top of Route Z to provide a wider bridge to accommodate all three lanes and to provide minimum, to meet the requirements for vertical clearance above Route Z. Right now, it's less than the 16.5 foot that's required. Additionally, we're looking at, Mike mentioned the staggered intersections on the west side of I-55 and Weir Road intersecting with Route Z very near the existing southbound ramps. So one of the things we looked at was realigning Weir to align with that exit ramp from southbound 55. What that does is it puts two intersections near the same location instead of having two intersections, consolidate that into one, which does improve safety, and it operates better. In doing that, taking into account there is a UPS facility that's being constructed where Mike's cursor is. There's other improvements being planned on the south side of the Union Pacific Railroad. So taking into account that growth and other growth throughout the corridor. The second piece that does is, if you remember, I mentioned before, the Union Pacific Railroad is very close to Route Z, which makes that ramp from Z to southbound 55 artificially short. And then once it connects to 55, you climb a hill for quite a distance. So what we looked at was taking the ramp traffic down Weir Road across Union Pacific, and then leave Weir Road just south of that park and ride lot, and connect to southbound 55 closer to the top of the hill with a longer ramp. So that allows the trucks to get closer to highway speed before they enter the highway, which helps the cars moving and with safety as well. Mike, I think I've covered what was coming to mind here. Was there others that you're thinking of?
No, I'll just, I guess, add on to that, that getting those trucks up to speed, it's a big safety issue and helps with traffic too. That we don't like to see big speed differentials between any vehicles, but especially between vehicles and trucks. So if we can bring those trucks into the interstate, allow them to merge easier at a better speed, that's going to be better for everyone. And then also the as you mentioned, the relocation of Weir Road does support those current developments that are under construction, and also taking into account any future developments that would be expected in this area.
Yes. And as you switch the slide, I'll just interject everything we looked at as we modeled this. Mike led the traffic analysis. We looked at not only what the traffic is currently, factoring in the growth. There's a planned port. There's many different potential, likely all across the board, residential, commercial, industrial developments within this area. We took into account that growth, and then we also, as typical for any MoDOT project for FHWA requirements, looked 20 years into the future and expanded looked at additional growth, and then designed this with the volume of trucks, the size of trucks, and the future volume of vehicles in mind. So this is the second page, shows the Herculaneum exit and interchange on the left side. That one's similar to the Peevely interchange, reconstruction of the bridge over the top of McNutt, improved vertical clearance, taking the bridge columns out of the travel lanes on McNutt. And then, so the reconstruction of McNutt in part is to connect what's already there to a reconfigured McNutt underneath I-55. There's some artificial widths of McNutt under I-55, in part due to the bridge columns. So the length of reconstruction is really just to get the lanes aligned, to connect the east side of I-55 to the west side of I-55. Construction will connect to that existing roundabout that's there on the west side towards Providence, with the expectation that the movement between the ramps and Providence, whether you're heading east or west, is going to be cleaned up. Unless you're very familiar with that area, people do tend to get confused driving through there, end up having to turn left onto the highway when they're intending to go through, etc. Moving south, there's a couple bridges over Central Avenue and then over 3rd Street. Those, based on the widening and then based on also the condition of the bridges, those are recommended to be replaced as well. Lengthen the ramps at the McNutt-Herculaneum interchange, lengthen the acceleration and deceleration lanes, all in an effort to improve safety and operations in here, and then adding the 3rd lane through this area as well. I didn't say it on the previous slide, but our recommendation is to add the 3rd lane from the center of the median out, which is a little bit different than what you see just north of Peevely, where there's still a gap between the northbound and southbound lanes. Our recommendation would be to close that gap and put a concrete barrier in between, in part because of how it could facilitate construction and allow 2 lanes northbound, 2 lanes southbound at all times through construction, because they could build in the median while traffic's where it is and then shift traffic into that new pavement and build where the traffic was to full ultimate condition. Okay. And then here is the last page reflecting the preliminary design concept that we have at the Festus Route A interchange. I mentioned before the right turn from Route A to the entrance ramps. You can see a little bit more of a wiggle right there to help the drivers understand, visually see the need to yield to the left turning vehicles when they have the green light. So that's kind of an operations and safety improvement there. Continuing the 3rd lane between A and 67 helps with the weaves, the operations through there, the heavy volume of traffic in that segment, northbound and southbound. The additional lane helps in both of those directions. And then where Mike's cursor is, at that point in the southbound direction, we would continue 3 lanes past that exit to southbound 67 towards where Mike's cursor is, and then from that point start to reduce down to 2. And at that point, a large amount of traffic has been dispersed that enters the corridor at Peevely. They exited Peevely, Herculaneum, Festus, and then still a large number exit south on 67. That's a good place to transition back to 2 lanes in this area. Looking at reconfiguring the cloverleaf interchange to get rid of the cloverleafs. One of the 2 issues with those is a small radius and large grade difference. You got to drive those real slow compared to the 55 mile an hour speed limit on 67 and the 70 mile an hour speed limit on 55. And then once you exit that loop ramp, you've got a short distance before the next loop ramp to accelerate and weave with the traffic on either 55 or 67. And then let's see, heading south on 67, the big feature that we're recommending here is to construct a grade separated interchange at the grade intersection where 67 meets CC today. The grades work that you could actually leave CC where it is essentially and lower 67 to go underneath Route CC. And what that does is the traffic heading south on 67, a majority of it passes CC. they would just free flow through there and not have to stop, and that prevents the cars from backing all the way up 67. And then with that, construct new ramps from 67 to Route CC, so people can still get to and from where they need to go in that area. Mike, I think I'll turn it over to you for any additional points, and then I think at that after that we'll head into the Q&A section.
Sure. There's just a couple more things on this area to point out. The turbine ramp, the big loop ramp around the interchange is for that big movement in the morning. The northbound 67 to northbound I-55 that we were talking about was an issue. That traffic would take that ramp, so you would stay in the right as you come up 67, exit onto there, and come around and pick up some traffic, and then it would stay separated from the I-55 lanes as you come north until you can get to a good point. We have the Route A traffic that would exit, and then we would bring the 2 lanes of that turbine ramp together with the 2 lanes of northbound I-55, join them together, and have one of those lanes then end, and then continue that 3-lane section all the way north through the project area. So 3 lanes from essentially Route A to the north, and then in between Route A and 67, essentially total of 4 lanes in that area going northbound. So big improvement for that interchange. And then the other movements at that interchange would use more typical kind of on and off ramps down at signalized intersections to make their turns either onto or off of the interstate. So a little bit better than some of the tight loop ramps that we had before. What that allows is pulling the interchange and that intersection away from the US 61 intersection where we see those issues before, where the ramps dump, put traffic right into the intersection very close. And the last thing I'll mention is we are proposing a new bridge connection on Old Highway CC. So when we talk about the congestion on Route A, and we're doing some minor improvements on A, the new bridge connection would allow for additional capacity for that traffic that does move from one side of the interstate to the other, between retail developments or from a development to the hospital, or any use along there. That is a little bit of a lower stress route, so very attractive for all modes of traffic, cars, but essentially more importantly, bicycles and pedestrians and some of the residential areas that went across. But it would essentially add more capacity in the area to get from one side to the other without having to do big improvements along Route A.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
Cordell, I think we're ready for the Q&A section. And I think there's been some questions posted.
Indeed, there have. Thanks, Will. As Will mentioned, it is time for our Q&A comment session. Once again, if you have a question or comment, please submit it by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And please remember, the only bad question are the ones that are never asked. Our first question tonight: when exiting I-55 southbound at the Festus interchange, at the end of the exit turning right, people sit there to merge to the far left lane to go to Lowe's. This ties up the exit. Is there anything planned there for this problem to be corrected? Will?
Okay, Cordell. So in short, yes. Part of the improvements, part of the requirements of this project is to make signal and operational improvements along Route A. So that is intended to be addressed, improved with that aspect of the project. As another piece that is going to be helpful to reconcile, to improve that, is what Mike just talked about, and you can see on the screen, is that new connection where old CC used to cross the highway. That is that we've studied that and found that there are a number of vehicles, a number of people that drive from one side to the other that wouldn't necessarily need to use Route A. So that would be a heavily used route. I guess not heavily used relative to that route, but enough use that a number of cars would choose that over taking Route A. So that should help Route A as well.
Thanks, Will. This next question pertains to the Herculaneum interchange. With the development of the port at Herculaneum, has consideration been given to increase truck traffic into and out of the port facility?
In short, yes. All of the geometric designs for where the road lanes might go, how big the turning paths are, large trucks, frequent trucks have been taken into consideration. And then the traffic models have anticipated that type of development, that development specifically, and future growth. So those have both been taken into account.
And one thing to mention there, Will, is we had presented 2 other alternatives for this interchange. And looking at those alternatives along with what we are showing now, they did not allow enough future development traffic to essentially keep good operations into the future. As Will mentioned, we look 20 years out into the future, where the interchange we have now and improving the lanes underneath, getting that kind of capacity back, do allow for those developments in the area. Specifically, a lot of that truck traffic that'll come through.
Thank you, Mike.
Our next question, does MoDOT have any plans to educate drivers on the proper way to merge and diverge onto and off of I-55 in the safest and most effective way possible? A lot of drivers don't seem to realize that they need to match the speed of the traffic they are joining. Conversely, many drivers start deaccelerating while they are still in the through lane.
Okay. A couple of things. One, and I'll maybe Jen, if you want to think about weighing in on this response. Part of the challenges along the corridor are the number of lanes and how short some of the ramps are, and how short some of the acceleration and deceleration lanes are after the ramp connects to Interstate 55. So by virtue of addressing a lot of those geometric deficiencies, drivers, irregardless of their experience level, will be better able to make their own decisions and merge with traffic more safely. Jen, do you have any thoughts or comments in addition to that?
No, well, I think that was kind of the approach I was taking as well. We are always encourage drivers to drive the way they're supposed to, and it is always a challenge to get them to do that. But one of the issues along this corridor is that it's hard for them to do it the way they should. And the improvements that we're making should allow better acceleration and deceleration to happen outside of the driving lanes of I-55.
Okay, thanks, Jen. The next question pertains to the Peevely interchange. The roundabout west of I-55 at the Herculaneum interchange is considerably larger than what appears to be planned at the Peevely exit off southbound Weir Road to southbound I-55. Why doesn't it make sense to use a larger roundabout with the number of large trucks that would be using the Peevely interchange? The roundabout at Barnhart gets tight with large trucks.
Okay, and that is a detail that would be worked out, that will be worked out in final design. Some constraints, some real practical constraints with a larger roundabout in that area does involve the private property next to Weir Road on the west side. So a larger footprint would require acquisition of property that MoDOT does not control. That said, the size of the roundabout, in part based on the volume of vehicles on the roundabout, taking into account the growth, the UPS facility, other development along Weir Road, the volume of vehicles using the ramp to enter I-55, the the number of lanes needed is different than at the Barnhart exit on Metropolitan. So this a single lane appears to be a good solution. Different intersection type might be a good solution as well. This is maybe considered a preliminary design as a concept to develop further, is what I would say. Regardless of what the solution is, it will accommodate the larger vehicles and the volume of vehicles.
Okay, thanks, Will. Next question. This refers to the Peevely interchange. How far up the I-55 hill at Peevely will the roundabout merge onto 55? Seems like an 18-wheeler will lose a ton of speed going around a tight roundabout to still hit 55 on a slight upward grade, potentially.
Okay. So the intention would be that the vehicles would be driving at Weir Road speeds between Route Z and the roundabout. And then once they leave the roundabout and enter the ramp, that's when they would accelerate. And then that length between the roundabout and where it connects to southbound I-55 is substantially longer than the existing ramp from Route Z to southbound 55 at the bottom of the hill. So the vehicles will have more distance to travel to accelerate. And then it does connect at or very near the top of the hill. So once they get to the top of the ramp, they're going to be able to be driving closer to the speed of the drivers on I-55, 70 miles an hour. And with the third lane, there's going to be less, not less cars, but less cars per lane. The density per lane is going to be lighter in this area. So there's going to be more room to merge at this location.
Thanks, Will. Next question. Have the additional roundabouts at the McNutt interchange been removed from the plans?
So that question comes from someone who was paying attention at the last round of meetings. We did show a solution that had roundabouts where the ramps from 55 connect to McNutt. What we found is those operate well. They move the trucks, they move the volume of vehicles. Currently, as it's constructed, and then well into what's called the design life of the corridor. But once they get 20 years out, they weren't operating as well as a standard intersection with a signal at the bottom of the ramps would. Part of it had to do with the proximity to the existing roundabout and the volume of vehicles. Relative to that, just the proximity between the two, it was starting to back up into each other. So that's the reason for the change.
That's also really taken into account some of these future developments, like the container port
Yes.
that would be expected.
Our next question, how long will Highway CC US 67 be closed to put a bridge in?
That is to be determined. A likely estimate would be 6 months to 9 months. I think that's
Okay.
similar to what we presented last time.
Okay, thanks, Will. How are the homes along US 67 between Highway CC and I-55 going to have access to US 67?
So that is some of the challenges of improving how 67 operates at CC between 55 and CC. To put that interchange in to connect the ramps, that does cause the connection to the residential and the commercial industrial properties on the north side to be reconfigured a bit. This concept, and it's a preliminary design, it's going back to the project goals, the ultimate solution might look different than what this does. But this concept looks at consolidating the entrance to that at a little bit closer to 55 at the existing Cloverleaf entrance. What we would look at doing is add a right turn lane next to 67, so you could move out of traffic, slow down and turn right, and then build a connector road back I guess from that location. The existing Cloverleaf residential would be served from that same, and then the Donover properties would build a little connector road from Cloverleaf, kind of doubling back right next to 67, with proper protection between the roadways, and that would reconnect all those properties back to 67.
Thanks, Will. What land needs to be acquired between I-55 and Highway CC?
Okay, so I'm assuming by that question, we're talking about along 67. So on this graphic, if you look at the red fill colored areas, that's where some type of permission, whether it's buying actual property for the roadway or getting permission to work on private property to construct this project, those are the areas that have been identified. And you'll see those sprinkled throughout the corridor.
Thanks, Will. I want to thank all of our attendees for their patience tonight. This Zoom session was scheduled to end at 8 o'clock, but we are going to answer each and every question that the attendees are submitting. So if you have a question, if you have not submitted it yet, please do so, and we will stay on the Zoom call once again until all questions are answered. Our next question: when exiting southbound I-55 to US 67, how many lanes will go through the new Highway CC interchange, and how far down US 67?
Okay, so leaving 55, we're recommending 2 lanes. Take that ramp. I think today it's 1. So we're adding a lane there. And then those 2 lanes would join the existing 2 lanes on southbound 67. So right where the ramp connects, it would be 4 lanes. Where the cursor is, a little bit further, and in that general area, that's where it would drop down to 3 lanes, and then 3 lanes would continue all the way through. And where that ramp starts, where the cursor is, from there, 2 lanes would continue under 67, and 1 lane would go up that ramp. And then coming down that ramp lane to southbound 67 from CC would join the 2 lanes on 67.
Okay, thanks, Will. Our next question: what will be done to the new bridge over Joachim and US 67? Will this be done before the I-55 work starts? This road and creek floods, which increases traffic on I-55.
So MoDOT does have a separate project planned to reconstruct that bridge at a higher elevation, so it doesn't flood as frequently. MoDOT has taken into account the construction of that project timed relative to the construction of this project and prioritized to where only one of the projects will be constructed at a time.
Can you educate drivers on scissor merge during construction? Some drivers try to keep this from happening.
Jen, I think either you or Justin take this one.
Yeah, we agree. If a scissor merge is necessary for the construction of design, I think that would definitely be an appropriate time to educate drivers for that.
Okay, our next question. This is past the current proposed work area, but with the much needed improvements being made in the intersection at US 67 and Highway CC, like eliminating the stoplight there, this leaves US 67 and Meyer Road as the only remaining stoplight intersection in over 100 miles on US 67 from Festus south. Do you have any considerations in doing anything at Meyer Road in the near future?
Jen, I think I'll turn this back to you for that one.
Yep. So MoDOT, both in the St. Louis district and in our partners in the Southeast district, have identified upgrading US 67 throughout basically its entire limits. However, it is an unfunded need for both of our districts. So we are aware that we would like to do something to continue to mitigate all of the access points on US 67, but at this time, there are no concrete plans to make that happen.
Thanks, Jen. And our final question for tonight. There is no diverging diamond at Festus?
That is correct. That was the other alternative that was presented at the last round of public meetings. And that one, part of the challenge with that, it did some things better, but some things worse. And part of why it did things worse is it moved the signal closer to West Gannon, and it just moved the signals for the interchange for the ramps closer to the existing signals on Route A. So that one did not make the cut.
Okay, thanks, Will. And thank you all for your questions and comments. We do have an ask of you tonight. We would appreciate if you would complete our online comment form. You can find our public meeting comment form on our project website under the virtual public meeting section. Our project website address is modot.org/I-55-corridor-improvements. Once again, that website address is modot.org/I-55-corridor-improvements. MoDOT will be accepting comments through Wednesday, October 19th. You can also sign up for project updates and find a video recording of tonight's Zoom on this site. In addition to submitting a comment form online, you can also submit comments directly to Project Manager Justin Wolf by emailing him at justin.wolf@modot.mo.gov. Once again, that's justin.wolf@modot.mo.gov. Or you can simply call Justin by calling 314-453-5097. That number once again for Justin, 314-453-5097. Please share this information with your family, friends, and neighbors. This concludes our virtual public meeting for the I-55 corridor improvements. Thanks again for attending. Have a great evening. Stay safe and good night.